Hello, my name is Kit Cabello. I'm with Hard Lens Media. Hard Lens Media can be heard every Saturday on Q4 Radio from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And in this interview here for CAN TV, I am proud to introduce Ted Sirota. He is the founder of Degenerate Artists Against Fascism. It's also connected a little bit to the organization Refuse Fascism. And let's just get this interview started with Ted. So for our viewers, first and foremost, can we get a little background to the founding of Degenerate Artists Against Fascism? What does it mean, its origin, and why did you create it?
Good question. Thanks for having me here, Kit.
Yeah.
In Nazi Germany, when Hitler first came to power in 1933, the very first thing he did was attack the arts. Mm-hmm. Now I think this has something to do with Hitler being a failed artist himself and being interested, right, in that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that.
Right.
It was a failed artist.
However, what it pointed out is that within fascism and a fascist regime, he understood how important thought is. How important it is to control people's minds. So, for instance, you had, like Picasso doing Cubism, and you see a face that's distorted and a triangle, and these, the human brain can analyze that and tell us that, oh, that's a face, right? But it's not a literal thing. Nazis were trying to stamp out that, that imagination, that ability of the human, brain to basically think outside the box, to be able to dream and see that other worlds are possible, because what they were trying to install was something very rigid and very controlled and very Aryan, So to me, that was always a really important lesson as an artist. I'm a drummer, a jazz musician mostly, but I've played all styles of music, and then I was always interested in what happened here in the 1950s under McCarthy, and Trump's idol, Roy Cohn. And, I found out recently, actually, that one of my relatives, Carl Foreman, was actually a big Hollywood screenwriter, and he was blacklisted and exiled to England. And I learned that recently from my mom. I didn't know he was my grandfather's first cousin. So I have these connections. As far as Nazi Germany, my great-grandfather was Polish and went back from Chicago Heights, went back to sell some land that they left behind, and the Nazis invaded during that time, and he was murdered in the Holocaust. So, and I grew up in the 80s, and I grew up, in the Reagan era, becoming politically conscious, and I've been watching this trend of Christian fascism in the United States, with homeschooling and biblical literalism and, anti-women, just choice, this very, Handmaid's Tale kind of vision, Mike Pence vision, I call him Mike Trump. So this whole thing developing, so for me, when Trump, to me, Hillary Clinton, I figured she would probably be elected, and we would have kind of the same old neoliberal U.S. imperialism, which is no, joy for the vast majority of humanity on the planet. But, they set this up so that it could be won by a Trump, and then there is elements in this society and in the power structure, in the ruling class, in the military, throughout the judicial system, there are fascistic thinking or fascist-minded Christian fascist elements that are fighting for this. So yeah, it was important for me as an artist to kind of start where, around with the community that I'm at, and see if I can get people moving and organizing, because it's going to take action, and it's going to take identifying yourself as being opposed to it.
So you've mentioned neoliberalism. So I think a lot of people are now starting to understand the terms of neoliberalism, what it is, and how we've gotten to where we're at right now due to the fact of a lot of our politicians adopting neoliberal policies. How has it really led to our current situation, and what's really being done to really address neoliberalism? Because with neoliberalism, we now have Trump, whereas for a long time, especially during the 2016 general election, people were stating Hillary Clinton's going to win, all the while at the same time ignoring just really how much people were disengaged from the political process.
Well, I think it's an important time really to step back and just look at the forest. And to me, neoliberalism is capitalism. It's imperialism. It's a certain way of looking at the world. It's a certain way of administering an imperialist empire. Fascism is another way of doing that, you know, and if it's one way or the other, it's still the same class in society. It's still the people that control the wealth in society, the tiny minority, what I refer to and many others would call the ruling class, you know. And so to me, the problem is capitalism. So let's just break this down, you know. I mean, it's very simple. In the 1980s, we had the catchphrase. Everything was, have a Coke and a smile, you know. Where's the beef? Where's the beef was huge. You know what? No collusion is where's the beef. What is where's the beef? It's a dumbed down, as dumbed down as you could possibly get morsel of information that you're feeding to people to brainwash them, to condition them, you know. That's for what? To sell dead animals, you know. I'm not a vegetarian, but let's be honest. To sell cattle, which is destroying the planet, you know, to feed people, which is causing diabetes and heart disease, and it's just making people sick. To do what? To make a profit, to return investment to your shareholders. You know, so this mentality has dumbed people down. It's conditioned them. Why? Because of capitalism. To turn people into consumers, not thinking active human beings that have a role to play in their own lives or in the future of humanity, but people who buy stuff if they can afford it. And if you can't, then there's a whole other system that they have in place for you, a whole other world for the black and brown people, you know. So to me, the problem is, yes, neoliberalism. I mean, Barack Obama would be, you know, what the U.S. has been doing since post-World War II, essentially. But you see now there's some serious divisions in the ruling class, and we have fascists in power right now with his hand on the nuclear button, controlling the most powerful and most destructive state in the history of humanity, Donald Trump. And we're sitting here talking about it like it's normal. It's not normal. It needs to be stopped. We tried to stop this before it started. You know, I'm on the National Steering Committee of RefuseFascism.org. And in December 19th, 2016, we came out in New York City. Jeremy Scahill spoke that night. Sansara Taylor, Carl Dix, some of the initiators, Chase Iron Eyes, who was at the Standing Rock, resistance movement. And we launched this movement, Refuse Fascism. And Degenerate Artists is sort of like, I did that on my own just before Refuse Fascism came out. So it was sort of coincidence at the same time, and I sort of linked Degenerate Artists up as like a kind of an artist wing under the call from Refuse Fascism, which says that, you know, this is a nightmare. This nightmare must end. Trump, Pence must go. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America.
Now, because of Trump's win in 2016, a lot of people are now coming out and organizations are forming up to, you know, bring political change, get people actively involved in politics or in activism, or at least to step up to do the right thing, to fight for those who are powerless in this current system. So the one thing that I always think about is like art and its role in political discourse and people engaging with one another. For Degenerate Artists Against Fascism, what is your organization's goal in using art as not only as a talking point, but also getting people to become actively involved and look to using art as a way to express their opinions, as well as at the same time to bring up the issues that are affecting our country, such as our impact in the environment, how we treat each other, social policies. Could you give us a little more detail about that? Yeah,
well, you know, I should say that when I started the group, I had actually just left. I'm a musician, but I was managing a bar, restaurant, nightclub, and I had just left that job. So it kind of freed me up a little bit, and I was tuning in to what was going on as I'm working my butt off day to day, you know, from November 9th every day. And I wanted to be in the streets, and I was, but it was hard, you know. As I was saying earlier on the radio show, when the day that Trump announced Rex Tillerson as his Secretary of State, for me, you know, everything was beyond the pale, but that was just like, all right, you know, let me set up a closed Facebook group here and gather some people around so that we can start organizing, you know, like what, we got to do something. This is a state of emergency here. So that's why I started really just as it's like an idea. And it was kind of like a call out to other musicians like, hey, let's start creating something here, you know, because I can't do it on my own. I'm not getting paid for this, you know, and I got, you know, I have, you know, my own stuff going on in my life as we all do. So it was more of like that idea, like, look, this isn't about any one person. This isn't about heroes or a small band of people that are going to go out and do, you know, do your work for you. This is about us. So if it's not other musicians, artists of all types coming out wearing the t-shirt representing as degenerate artists, and there is no degenerate artist, you know. So I really threw it out there as like a line for people to latch onto, and it worked really. So I've connected with people all over the world because, like I said, you know, this move towards fascism is affecting people all over in Italy and Greece and Australia. You know, not that there's government there, but there's these struggles on a local level, and we're meeting artists from all over the world online. You know, I would say that a good thing to do is to just follow us on. A lot of the things are as artists, and in art you can talk about them. You know, it's like was it Charles Mingus who said writing about jazz is like dancing about architecture. You know, it's just like there's certain things you can't really put in words. So it's good as an artist, to follow us. You know, you can follow our Instagram page and sort of see with 1,000 words, you know, what we're trying to say, because there's been some great art really focused on Trump and this qualitative leap into fascism, you know, that I've seen and shared and that we've produced. And we've done a lot of projections in Chicago, which got a lot of, you know, love around the world and stuff like that. But, you know, the idea of it is to spread this not an ideology, but a way of thinking that we have to. It's not just #resist. We're going to vote in November. No, we have to build this in society, and the artists play a major role in that. You know, artists and art often leads the people. You know, it opens up their minds and it allows them to envision, like I said earlier, another world is possible. If you don't think another world is, you know, I mean, if you're a slave in Georgia and, you know, 170 years ago. My math is bad, so don't hold me to that. But you know, how do you have hope for anything? You know, and that's where we have that role to play. We need to be in the streets too.
And now I've also noticed too that, and this is going to harken back to the earlier part of this interview where you said that one of the key things that fascists do is that they go after art, they go after thoughts, they go after things that don't fit into their rigid, very structured society. And the one thing I've noticed here in the United States, even before Trump got elected, is that there's still also a wall. There was a wall still for people to get actively involved and to see the arts. Like if we look at the Art Institute, it's a pretty penny to get in there. Yes, they have their free days, but still there was a time when I hear some of my relatives speak that you used to go in there for free. There was there was also a lot of schools that taught art classes, but now because of quote unquote budget crisis. Like a lot of these programs are being cut, so a lot of people like in low-income communities, minority communities, like they don't have art programs as much, and so really, Trump is a problem. And let's say he's defeated in 2020. What do we do about these same elected officials who still pass these policies towards not funding our schools? Or we have these art museums where it costs an arm and a leg to get in there. How do we make art accessible to working class people again?
Okay, well, you know, I have to answer some of these questions in a dual role. Okay, so
go ahead.
So as a founder, you know, representative of Degenerate Artists Against Fascism and Refuse Fascism, you know, what we're trying to do right now is unite as tens of millions, you know, get people in the streets, starting in the tens of thousands in cities all across the country, building to hundreds of thousands, eventually to millions, tens of millions, demanding this nightmare must end, Trump and Pence must go. This regime is illegitimate. Why? Because they're fascist, okay? Any way you look at it, if you say you're an American, if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, and you want to believe that you live in a democracy, then if you have a fascist regime in power, we need to discuss that and get to the truth of the matter. And people who care about humanity and the planet, we don't have time for this. We don't have till 2020. Are you kidding me? We're going to drive them out this summer. We're going to drive them out by the fall. You know, you and me, man, it's got to be people, teachers that are coming out on strike, the students that are sick of going into their schools like they're going into prisons and being feared of hunted down, you know, women who can't have an abortion have to travel halfway across the country to find a clinic that can serve them. Immigrants where their, you know, grandmother is afraid to go to the store to buy a gallon of milk because she's afraid she might get picked up by ICE and deported, you know. Fathers being ripped literally from their children as they're driving them to school and thrown in cages and deported. People being dehumanized and degraded. People being murdered in Kansas because some white guy thought that they were Muslims, but they were really Hindus. This is what we're living in. Okay, yes, it's always happened, but now they're pouring gasoline on the fire. And we can't stand around and say like, oh, this has been going on forever. No, this is new now. I've been following this since the early 80s. You know, and that's when the education, that's when the cuts started in schools. Under Reagan. They started he wanted to pass off ketchup as a vegetable in the cafeterias. They eliminated all the music programs. They eliminated school bands. When I went to school, you can pick an instrument, that the schools own the instruments, and you can learn to play music, and you can learn art, and you can open up that part of your imagination. But as this system of capitalism, now this is me speaking, okay, because you don't have to be anti-capitalist to unite with degenerate artists or refuse fascism. You can be a libertarian, you can be a Republican, you could be a nothing. But you can see the threat, the existential threat to the planet and all of humanity, and unite with others who want to end that. Then what people don't understand is that when we start that struggle, that's going to awaken and bring so many millions of people to political life into understanding. Do you guys ever see videos in history of 1968 around the world? Right. You know how there are these times in the world and history where things erupt, right, and where the people erupt as well and awaken. Right. And that's what was so exciting to me about the youth in Miami after the school shooting and all these youth walking out of school. Now we're like, oh hum, there was a school walkout. No, that's a big deal.
Right, it was on a national
scale. It's a big deal, right? So to me, personally, Ted Sirota, capitalism will destroy everything that doesn't bring a profit. It's an anarchy. It's designed to create profit at any expense. That kills art. That kills music. Capitalism is the enemy of art. It's the enemy of music. It destroys it. And they destroyed it for black people and inner city youth. And what happened was, just like under slavery, when they took music away from Africans, they created music with their feet on the floor, and their hands, and their chest, their legs, you know, and they were allowed to do that on Sunday. And they had their voices. And they created the blues, and they created American culture. And in the 80s, when they stripped music from kids, they took their dad's turntable and you know, Kool Herc started playing around with it and scratching it. And, you know, they infused Jamaican sound system culture in the South Bronx, and they created hip hop. And now we have Kanye West as, you know, dragon blood with Trump. So
dragon energy. I think that's what he was going on to. But there's a couple other things too that need to be taken into account. That there's some people who will say, well, this is the system we live in. This is the world we live in. It'll correct itself, and then everything will be back to normal. But really, when it comes down to political discourse in this country, once something happens, nothing ever returns back to normal. There's always been some segments to where there's been a huge change in how things are done. So how do we at least get more people to become actively involved? Because for a long time here in this country, there's always been a large portion of the population that said, well, this is the system we live in. We can't get involved, or I don't want to get involved because I'm not going to matter. What do you want to add on to that? Because it seems like because of that kind of mentality, we have the system that we have now.
I would like to tell those people, you know, stop thinking like an American and start thinking about humanity. You know, start being a human, and stop thinking about being an American, because Americans are 5% of the world's population, and this country is destroying the planet, and we play a role in that. We're here in the belly of the beast. You know, the result of Scott Pruitt destroying the EPA, the people who are going to suffer the most are mostly black and brown people around the equators and low-lying, you know, where the sea levels are rising. Right. People in Sri Lanka, they know that. They're putting these calculations, they're keeping these calculations in mind as they destroy the planet, you know. It sounds like hyperbole, It sounds like a science fiction film, but this is what's happening right now, you know? So people need to understand that the existential threat of what's going on. We said from the beginning that Trump is a lot more dangerous than Hitler ever was or ever could be. And the more you think about that, with the empire that he has, you know, Hitler in 1933, 34, you know, yeah, he consolidated his power after the Reichstag fire. But up to that point, you know, Germany was a battered country. You know, they came off the heels of World War I and
the Depression.
Yeah, and Depression. I mean, he didn't come to power with a nuclear arsenal that the world has never seen, and a turnkey security state system, and a DEA and ICE and the CIA and the FBI and the local police and wars raging all that they're managing already. No, Germany was contained at that point.
Right.
All this takes is one switch, one match, and the whole world is lit up.
Right.
You know.
So then for political discourse here, you know, for the Democrats, for example, or at least establishment Democrats, were going on for a long time saying #resistance, and you have people like Nancy Pelosi who were stating that Trump is a threat, but when it came down for a key vote for the Security Act, she voted in favor of it. So the thing is, how do we then reform a political system where it's two parties who basically are endorsed and funded by large real estate, Wall Street, the banks, corporations, and the top 1%? How do we really get a government then that represents us, and at the same time, too, have a population that will hold said new government accountable?
Here's what I want to pose to people, everyone in society right now. Do we want order or do we want justice? That's what's being posed to us. And right now, that questions being posed to the Democrats, and they're clearly choosing order, even if that is the order of fascism.
Right.
Bernie Sanders, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, every single one of them down the line. Yeah, you have a few of them in the House that, you know, you're always going to have the ones that they'll let go on the further end of the spectrum and start talking about impeachment, your Maxine Waters, things like that. But to the rest of the Democrats, it's off the table. Okay. We're called Refuse Fascism and Degenerate Arts Against Fascism for a reason, because what we're facing is fascism. Now, it's not fully developed. Mm-hmm. They haven't fully consolidated their power yet. Right. They're still facing a lot of opposition, and they're still infighting within the system. There's these checks and balances, but that's not going to hold. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There is, though, okay, if there is an impeachment of Trump, the one thing a lot of people have said is that, yes, Trump has done and said terrible things, and he's a little incompetent at the same time. But if you impeach him, a lot of critics say, well, then we get Mike Pence, who's more competent and knows how to manipulate the system and use the system, as he was at one point the governor of Indiana. Then we have to address Mike Pence, and what does that look like? Is the risk of a Trump impeachment really worse?
That's why we're not calling for impeachment. We're saying the whole regime must go. That means Donald Trump, Mike Pence, Jeff Sessions, Scott Pruitt, Betsy DeVos, Wilbur Ross, the corpse of Wilbur Ross. All the way down the line, this regime has to be removed from power. The only way to do that is to have tens of millions of people in the streets demanding that, because we're deceiving ourselves. The other side knows that. The fascist foot soldiers in the streets in Charlottesville and in police uniforms all over the United States, they know they're locked in a struggle for their lives and generational struggle. They know that white people are becoming the minority in this country. And they know that they're going to dedicate their lives to the death to ensure that it doesn't happen. And they have their buddy in the White House now attacking caravans of immigrants fleeing terror, you know, ignited initially by the United States and CIA. You know, I mean, this is going on now. The brown shirts that, you know, the brown shirts in the Nazi Party, they carried out a very small percentage of the crimes of the Nazis. It was the German people that did it, you know. So he has his base, but he also has he wouldn't be in power if he didn't have very strong support in the ruling structures of society and the highest echelons of this system. He's got that, and he's got all the white people and backers in this society that maybe they don't want to speak up and even admit it. But, you know, this is, they've got to go. And then for me personally, the whole system's got to go. I'm not talking about reforming this system. The system can't be reformed. Again, that's me as an individual, not as, we have people, again, in these organizations that voted. I work very closely with someone in Refuse Fascism who campaigned for Hillary Clinton, but she clearly sees this as a fascist regime and is acting accordingly.
Right. So then how do we then at least, I guess, not reform, but at least implement something that is sustainable so that there is true checks and balances? Because of Citizens United, money rules the system. And of course, the candidate with the most money usually wins. And those who are like grassroots sometimes lose. But there has been those occasional flips to where like a grassroots candidate does win. So what is a real functioning in democracy to really live under, so that it's not ever influenced by money and politics, so that we don't have another neoliberal system put into place?
You can't have that under capitalism. I mean, capitalism is based on exploitation. You can't. Sorry, That's my answer to you. Okay. And people trying to reform it, a Bernie Sanders or a democratic socialist or whatever, what have you. It's like you want to get a shark to stop eating fish. Good luck. You can't. Read Marx, and you disagree, but you've chosen a side. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to impart to you, is that it's not a choice about pulling a lever or I'm for this cause or that cause. We are locked in a struggle for the future of humanity right now, and people need to act accordingly. That's why I started an organization. Look at the 1960s. How did the Black Panther Party start? People, they're in Oakland, and in the black community is so neglected and oppressed and shunned that they can't even they want a stop sign. Kids keep getting run over. It's dangerous. People keep running this corner, and the system wouldn't give them a stop sign to protect their community.
Until finally people in that
community they picked up guns.
Right.
Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale came out, and they studied the law books, and they studied the United States law code, and they memorized it. Right. And when the cops approached them in their community, they went, and he recited the law to the police. Mm-hmm. So, but what happens when the oppressed rise up like that or assert their rights? The law changes. Right. Then you don't have the law on your side. So we don't live in a democracy to begin with. What I'm fighting for is to get back to the crappy system that we had before fascism took hold, and then continue. Right. And hopefully in that struggle, we awaken more people. We create new leaders.
Then with that being said, where can people who are watching this learn more about your organization and find you guys on social media?
Great. We're on Facebook, Degenerate Artists Against Fascism. We have an open a public page and a closed group you're welcome to join if you would like to link up with others and you're not a fascist troll. And then we're also on Instagram at Degenerate Artists, Twitter at DegenArt, and you can email us at degenartists@gmail.com.
And that's a very good...
and refusefascism.org. We have a brand new call for 2018 that analyzes this situation. It's the correct analysis. Read it, discuss it, debate it.
All right. And with that being said, thank you so much for joining Heartlands Media at Sirota. We're really glad to have you here. Clearly, the fight for a better future is going to take... it's going to be a long road, but so long as people remain actively involved, we can all contribute. And to our viewing audience, if you want to learn more about Heartlands Media, we have a website, heartlandsmedia.com. Please check us out and support us. We have a link where you can even introduce some guests that we could possibly interview. So I just want to say peace to everyone. Let's all do what we can to build a better future.
You're watching Heartlands Media.